Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello all, welcome back. It's that time of year again it's June, so it's Pride Month. So welcome to the start of our Pride series here, and I have an interesting guest that I think you're going to enjoy. But before we get into that, let's start with the classic disclaimer of this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes. It is not a substitute for working with a mental health worker. Please seek a mental health worker in your area. And I would also encourage you to consider, if you're not sure it allows it, see if you can find one online. I know it's not the same as working with us in person, but still get some connection with mental health out there. So today's guest, someone I've noticed for quite a while from afar. I mean, they come across the feeds and so forth. But recently, I was presenting at the Leather Leadership Conference here in Atlanta back in March 2023. And this individual was actually in the audience and sat in several of my presentations. And why I think this is an appropriate guest for this particular month is also talking about intersectionality. As those of you who have been listening this long have been aware that much of what we talk about here on the show and many of the guests involve intersectionality, and especially also reflect some of my intersectionality. And today's guest is another example of where we have that intersectionality across multiple identities, which reinforce and strengthen us. So today's guest is JTebias Perry. JTebias Perry is a freelance journalist and columnist for two gay editorials in Atlanta, Georgia, The Voice and The Peach magazine. His most recent contributions and work for Black History Month is his published article entitled Reflections on the Black Atlanta Leather Life, a Perspective of Black History Month. His activism of diversity, equity, and inclusion are his true passions. He was the title holder, Outreach Director for NCSF for a number of years, which is the National Coalition for Sexual Freedoms. He competed at IML, International Mr. Leather, in 2004. Sir JTebias inspired the audience, "Don't be the problem, be the solution for a bigger, better leather community." This sentiment is still the motto he lives by today. Sir JTebias founded the Rainbow of Colors with his late best friend Emmanuel Baldwin in 1994 in Texas. Rainbow of Colors' mission was to assist local civilians with HIV. One fundraising highlight was a weekly dance at 8 Space Bar and Caf in San Antonio. He's also recently retired from Delta Airlines and was sitting in the audience listening to me talk about some of the issues of leadership and what we need to be aware of from an interpersonal relationship science standpoint with mental health. So please, let's give a great welcome to JTebias Perry. Welcome to the Untying Knots.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I must say that I competed in the IML in 2014, and maybe that was an oversight on my bio. But what I want to say before we get started is that I am so freaking proud of you from LLC. Your presentations in your classes were not only just inviting, but they were a match on all social and educational levels, because the class was very diverse. It was all the classes were very diverse. But I want to say a big kudos to you in that you did a really good job from one educator to another. You were absolutely amazing, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. I was sweating quite a lot while making those presentations. Yeah, because I originally figured I would only be making one presentation, but didn't realize I was going to be making 3.
Yeah. It was really good, though. It was really good content. Really good content.
Good. So back to you, though. How did you get here?
Okay. How did I get here as in my leather journey? My kinky side and curiosity started probably mid-range of my military career in the early to mid 90s. And I exited the military in 2001 officially, and I moved to Fort Lauderdale, where had gotten a divorce. I was married, believe it or not, married to a woman, divorced before my military career ended. Met my first sir, didn't know my identification, didn't know who I was or any of that. And 2001 to 2002, I explored a lot with my former and moved back to Atlanta, found Onyx. Well, I stumbled into a bar night with Onyx hosting, and that curiosity transferred from Fort Lauderdale to Onyx, and my journey started there.
So in general, we can say that Onyx was at least a provided some degree of a safe environment for you to explore in.
At that time, Onyx was my launching pad. That is very safe to say. Educate, empower, and explore, of course, is the motto. And I grew and was went under mentorship through, at that time, with one mentor, and then graduated into 3 mentors for competition, teaching, development, kink, fetish, whip throwing, flogging, the whole gambit. So my mentorship was a range of 3 people, that one of which knew very little but was very specific in kink. The other one mid-range, title holding, producing, all of that. And the other one, which I'm currently still under technically, was my personal development as a Leatherman, confidence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a beautiful thing that I got the range of all 3, which Master Bruce I'm still under right now.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. And again, one thing we'll say is that whatever you do with Onyx, it is part of what you make for your journey. Don't go into expecting everything from them. You have a journey that is your own. You started long before you joined them, and you will be continuing long after, whether you are a member of them or not. But know that's your journey.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that is very true. I mean, because the journey is the one thing about all of us as Leathermen and as about kinky found folks, is that our journey is forever evolving. It looks different from 2002 to 2023. The person that I was at that time is definitely not the person that I am now. So yeah, that's definitely a accurate point, and I appreciate that. Yeah.
So there too, and we've mentioned Onyx, but this also gets into the aspect of the identity of leather and kink, and especially for us as people of color. And there is, like so many other things, especially when we look at the LGBT spectrum, a lot of times the standard image that gets put out there is a standard image of a white person.
And you know what? I don't know if it was you that I had that conversation with. And when it comes down to leather and fetish, though Tom Finland is supposed to be the standard, that standard to me looks so different. Though that was a standard back in the, whenever he started it through the 80s and the motorcycle clubs. But for us, I mean, Black and brown and BIPOC people, we changed that shit, man. I mean, we made it our own because we play different, we look different, we taste different. The choice of words that we use in certain spaces are different. So that Tom Finland model may be the standard for some, but it doesn't go all the way across all spectrums. And one more point that I want to make is that, yes, I've overheard that, Black people don't look good in leather. Black men don't look good with dreads in a cover. That Black skin does not mesh well with another Black fabric. I've heard it all. And what that has done, it is really given me the strength and the courage, because a lot of times the courage or lacking the courage of something keeps us conformed to what keeps us fucked up. So as much as we develop that courage, it needs to be explored. while it's in its raw form, because courage also can sometimes turn into fear when it's not validated in some cases. So we, as Black and brown and indigenous people, we have to be unafraid of change, no matter what that looks like for all of us. It has to be authentically you in that space. And even the transformation has to be something that you recognize in yourself and not going by a carbon copy of something that so many have done in this community.
Which, and depending on particularly where we're dealing with here in the US or in Europe, there is the aspect of the clone standpoint of it. But what's just having to take a moment of taking apart what you just said there about those beliefs is like, are you talking about the type of material or the color of the material? Because black is a fabric color across the entire freaking world.
Right.
There are some outfits that look incredibly great on people that are brown, Black, and indigenous in Black that some people can never carry off.
Right.
But no, it sounds like you're having an issue with the fact that this is a Black, brown, or indigenous person wearing leather. And suddenly I really want to see just to our Middle Eastern members, I'd love to see one of your this sort of robed items done entirely in leather.
That would be absolutely hot. And also the other thing too, just to piggyback off of that, in these spaces, and I've taught a class which was called POC Navigating in White Dominated Spaces. I taught this class for a number of years. And the basis of the class was not about Black people or indigenous people being in a white dominated space. That was only just to lure you in. The real point of the outline and the meaning of the class was how you and I see each other in that space, how you and I act towards each other in that space. And it comes with a lot of, to get to that point of us seeing each other, me seeing you as a Black man in this pretty much white dominated space, there is some emotional dying on the part of that person who really needs to see the other person. We have to go through a maturity level of actually seeing each other. And it's our business and it's our evolution and purpose is to not only see each other, but to validate seeing each other in that space. And it needs to be real. It needs to be real. And I think that the younger kid, and I call them kids all the time, and they always say, please don't call us younger kids. I can't help but call them kids because they're so much younger than I am. But we have to be able to say to each other in those spaces, Okie D, good job, man. Good fucking job. And give you a hug and, just to validate you, because for some of us, and we were talking about London earlier before we came on, is that seeing each other in spaces like that and embracing each other only makes us, as I said, a bigger and better leather community by us validating and seeing each other.
So I think we probably should give some context to our discussion about that we're having earlier about London and England, and just Europe. I probably can also say Europe in general. With all of this. So could you rephrase a bit of that so we can give people context?
Yeah, sure.
About the situation.
Yeah, when it comes down to, because we were talking about, because the Commonwealth is 84% of the Commonwealth is African indigenous people that make up the Commonwealth that England owns, the Queen of England owns pretty much, or the country of England owns. So people who are Black indigenous people from those countries, from the Commonwealth, they are British raised and they're British educated. And when they come into contact or in the same space or sharing space with white Europeans, they cater much easier to a level of white fragility than we see here in the States, because we show up to a space like, hey guys, how's everyone? But they kind of tiptoe and shrink themselves catering to white fragility when that is very foreign to me. And I don't really recognize that. When I show up to a space, and I'm just there. I'm not there to prove myself. I'm there to show up as my authentic self as a Leatherman who knows who I am and being okay with that. But it's so many times that I've witnessed um, people who are African origin or African descent that shrink themselves in these spaces. So me living in London back and forth for the last 8 years, I've seen that, and I'm slowly but surely changing that from friends that I have from some parts of the Commonwealth, including Madagascar, which my friend Stefan is one of my dearest friends, but he was raised in Paris, but he still to this day cater to that fragility, which is very foreign to me. So yeah, that's what we're discussing.
Which in some ways, there's a classic idea of the rude American, but now what does it mean to be the quote unquote rude Black American?
You know what? See, now then let's go into that. Let's go into that. See, I'm trying to find where should I go into this interest point, because those stereotypes comes with us based on what, and I hate saying white people, based on what white people see on TV, and then they perpetuate that on us in real time and in person. So the common white person, and I tell my husband that, who is British white all the time, most white people who are privileged, they don't know about us until they have to cross the tracks. So the only thing that most white people know, because is what they see on TV, because they're typically around people that look and sound like them. And I'm not really stereotyping white people. I'm just saying, from my education and me having so many other white friends, the only thing they really know is based on, not through experience, because everyone that they know and that they're friends with, they look and sound like them, they think like them, they vote like them. And it becomes this bubble that they harbor, and only certain people that look and sound like them can infiltrate that. And that's the disservice sometimes even of the leather community, because it looks the exact same way. And keep in mind, and going back to another article that I wrote, a broken system within a broken system, which is, yes, there is racism in America, but us being gay, that's one level. Being Black, that's another level. So that racism against white gays towards Black gays is a broken system within a broken system. And it all needs to be fixed. So in Europe, it looks different. Racism is more subtle and it looks different, but it doesn't help that other individuals who are Black and Indigenous who come from the Commonwealth shrink themselves due to white fragility.
Very much so. And even then, too, in that intersection of these different identities, then we get into the notion about what it means to be in leather and kink, which also gets added into that standpoint of there is the racism, misogyny, ageism, whatever ism is there, even the standpoint of even colorism and such.
I was just about to say that. Yeah. And then there's the colorism also, because I have friends that are from Brazil as well. And my Brazilian friends talk about that all the time, because the original Brazilians came directly from jet, as we call it, jet Black Africans. And they were the most powerful of the Brazilians, of the Venezuelans, of the Argentinians. But now that whole thing looks different based on white influence and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And then what society tells us is acceptable. So, I mean, it's just a matter of just appreciating where you are and just learning more about yourself and not being afraid to shed and be transparent.
Which then I think brings again the aspect of where is the intersectionality getting missed, since this is going to be airing in June for Pride, when we keep hearing the issues of drag doesn't belong at Pride, leather doesn't belong at Pride, kink doesn't belong at Pride. All of these things are treating it as if it's a singular thing, as opposed to a place where we have multiple intersections of identity.
Right.
Which actually gives some of us more strength to be there at Pride than it does for others.
Yeah.
One of the things I know is talked about in especially in therapy circles, especially some of the Black therapy circles, is identity development. And that, then I'm blanking on the person's name, but there is a theory of identity development which basically recognizes someone's, they can get myopic.
That's true.
And some people will stay in that myopic standpoint. And then they will move into a much broader understanding of the world.
Right.
So it's an aspect of where is there a place that some of these claims about leather and kink and all of these things don't belong in Pride is because there are people who have not finished their identity development, but are holding on to certain things, much like what you were saying about the Africans and the Commonwealthans who still tiptoe around.
Yeah, and it's such a disservice because, I mean, Pride is for all of us. When Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rodriguez threw that first brick, there were people already in the trenches in Pride who died fighting for us to do what we do from a gay perspective, from a kink perspective, all of that. So when I go to these Pride events now, which they look different every single year, I guess it's the older that I get, I can still appreciate it because I'm in that space to display my leather and to display what I'm so proud of. And people make it, I think the reason why people want to keep certain things separate and, drag queens should be here, Leathermen, leather pride should be here, gay folks should be here, lesbians should be here, trans should be here, is because as Americans, we make it easier to pigeonhole people into what our understanding is of that said community. And we make it easier just to say, okay, no, you belong over here because you look like you belong over there. It makes it easier for them just to appreciate, like men of a certain age like myself and some of my other leather friends, we're of a certain age and we can accept more. And you would think it would be the opposite way, but we can accept more and just see people for who they are. And I think we should start pushing this through mentorship and through education of our younger leather and kinky folks, that accepting everyone is the key, because that's the only way that we can grow. Yeah.
Very true. Very true. And something else I was listening to in another podcast pointed out too, is that for most people, their sense of culture and identity comes from growing up in that culture. But to be LGBT means that you're not getting your LGBT, unless you got LGBT family members, you're going to have to step outside of your culture to learn that history, learn that relationship, and that relationship transcends multiple identities.
Yeah, that's true.
And even bringing the neurodiverse, which I know I count myself in that too. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's a lot more leather and kink people and a lot more neurodiverse people who'd also enjoy life through the leather and kink field, just because of also the sensory components that get played with in the kink world.
Right. That's true. It's very true.
And is some of that also some of the stuff that has been your topics of work when you've been writing your articles for those newspapers?
Yes. Yeah. What I will say is that and we talked about the authenticity of my freelance journalism. When I write, I'm a very weird, I'll call myself a weird writer, because I have to be in my solitude when I write. And I mean, everything has to be off. And it's an energy thing too. And I mean, I'm sure that you've written articles before. It's personal to me. And it's me shedding myself onto this paper. And I'm thinking that my work is going to be my work when I see it in print. Sometimes editors and magazines and wherever it's going to be presented, they'll change the authenticity of your work, sometimes from a power structure of, well, this is my magazine. This is ABC magazine. This is not Sir J. Tobias Perry magazine, so I can edit it as I will. But what you're doing is you're chopping away at my integrity that it took me weeks to write. So we have to be authentic when we show up in these spaces of identity. That's all that the world deserves, is your authentic self, no matter what that looks like. And I'll give you this as an example. Recently, and I've been contemplating it for a while. I was like, I'm being influenced by some of the younger generation, and I wanted to explore it for myself a few years ago. And this was gender bending. And I was like, well, I'm thinking from a gay perspective, all of us take on the construct or mannerisms of a Black woman, as a gay man before the leather thing came on. And that may seem as parallels with being gay. But from a leather perspective, that standard that we talked about earlier was something that you could never explore, especially from a dominant standpoint, from a cover standpoint, from the D and the M side of the slash. It's kind of hard to embrace a gender bending side from either of those sides of the slash. And at a photo shoot that I did recently, after I made my transition, as I said earlier, a friend of mine.
Just folks are aware, when we say transition, we're not talking about gender.
No,
you're going trans. We're different transition, different subject matter.
Right. It was a transition from along my journey about socialization and affiliation. So a friend of mine who's a designer said, well, I got something that I want you to try on, and I want you to see how you feel in it. And it was a floor length leather skirt. And I looked at it and I said, oh man, that's nice. I said, what woman is going to wear that? He said, well, you're going to put it on. And I was like, oh, okay. And I tried it on, and it really brought me back. It almost, I had like not a premonition, like a flashback of a feeling that I had 15, 20 years ago when I wanted to put on a dress or put on a skirt, but still be in my masculine form with my cover on, with, everything being on the left, me being a dominant, me being, a sadist, and, what I do in kink. And would it change me? Would the expectation be effeminate? Do I have to act like this? Do I have to raise my voice? And I really fucking didn't know. I really did not know. So I put it on, and I told him, I said, you know what? I want to shoot this with one of my photographer friends, called a friend of mine, shot the actual skirt. He made me 3 different vests, like really form-fitting, with a black cotton shirt, high collar, with my armband on the outside, my cover, with my whips and my floggers and my boots underneath the skirt. And it was the most powerful, and I'm getting emotional thinking about it, because we starve ourselves so much about what people would say, and talking about identity and what the Black community would say, what the Black leather community would say. People that you've known for a very long time, what would they think of you? Would they think less of you because you chose to wear a skirt? And as I said earlier, man, the only thing we owe it to society is just to be ourselves. And I was actually very comfortable after, doing the shoot. And it is actually going to be, and I'm probably speaking ahead of myself, but it's 2 of the pictures are going to be the front and back cover of my upcoming book on mentorship, on Leathermen.
Very nice.
So yeah, I got it out. See, I did it. Yeah.
Well, with the announcement of that book that's coming up, what do you think is the time frame for it?
Oh, you are really peeling this damn onion back. So I have three people that I trust with my life. One of which, my mentor, Master Bruce, is finally finishing up the proofing for it. So
Mm-hmm.
far, so good. He's on I think chapter 19, and there are 21 chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And once the rough draft is done, I think it should be ready. I'm hoping, I'm hoping by IML or Fetish Week London, which is in July 9th
Okay.
through the 16th.
So with luck, when this airs, then you'll be having an announcement party for this soon.
Coming
If
to San
not, I mean,
Francisco.
yep, yeah, because I mean, IML is in May, so we won't be there. But hopefully by July, we'll be able to have an announcement party for that. So you
Thank
heard it
you.
here, folks. Here for your first, folks.
Yeah, man. The packaging, all of that. And it's just, it's it's a it's a really good body of work. And I must say so for myself, because it's the first book that I've written, though I've written
Mm-hmm.
hundreds and hundreds of articles. Me pouring into this book on leather mentorship, how to get it and how to benefit from it, is all of me on paper from
Mm-hmm.
start to finish, different tactics, different different ways to find it, how to vet. I mean, because
Mm-hmm.
we do all of this all the time. We're like, just go to their Facebook page, and that's all the vetting that we need to do. That's all you need to do. And
Yeah.
it's so much meat on the freaking bones in this book. And I gotta send you a copy before it comes out, but you gotta keep it on the low, low, low,
Of
because
course.
it is it is really, and I mean, not to veer off the subject, but we go into so many books that we read, from Leather Sex to the Leather Boy Handbook, and with Vince Andrews and other people that we admire from afar. But this book is really the blueprint on the foundation of this community, because mentorship and shadowing is what brings us and lures us into the space, and what develops us. Because if you just come in, oh, I'm just going to put on a leather vest and I'm going to become a Leatherman. I'm going to go and buy me a $150 cover, and I want you to call me sir. It teaches you all this different stuff, man, that we see now. And I mean, it's so many things in the new guard versus the old guard, and we don't need the foundation of protocol, and because I'm my own person, and I'm a millennial, and I'm gonna be what I want to be. It's so much of that we have to give freedom to, but without the foundation, I mean, what is it?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying about that aspect of, to learn about culture, learn about history as
Yeah.
LGBT is not going to be found within your own culture of, shall we say, race or religious identity.
Yeah.
It's got to be found elsewhere, which means to some degree, a portion of you must go back to beginning the beginner's mind. Doesn't
Right.
mean and I think that's one of those things that often gets caught up in the idea is that, oh, you're going back to beginner's mind. Well, you're going back to beginner's mind in everything. No,
Right.
you're going back to beginner's mind in the subjects.
Right.
You still have all this other life experience here. Can you make that life experience work with this new component, as opposed to they are separate things?
Exactly, because it's like inexperience is not going to teach inexperience.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's really not. They're on the same level. So I just we've had a conversation about that. Is that I'm just such a stickler on mentorship, no matter how it looks, no matter what's negotiated upon. Mentorship is the key to everything. It teaches you consent. It teaches you patience. It teaches you grace. It teaches you self-care. It teaches you everything that you need to know, as long as it is authentically platonic mentorship. I said what I said.
And I think that is a much better place for us to take our break on, because I was going to hit this a little earlier one with the book, but oh no, I think this is far better of a place for us to take our break.
That's great.
So stay tuned, folks, here on Untying Knots. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with JTebias Perry, Leatherman extraordinaire. And we'll be back soon for our second half.
Wow.
So stay tuned.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it, so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
Enjoying our shows and can't get enough of us? Follow us on Instagram at Voice America Talk Radio and see what we're cooking up for you.
You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingnotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingnotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Welcome back, folks. This is Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with JTebias Perry, a Leatherman extraordinaire, as we continue to talk about this place of being Black, into gay, into leather, into kink, and the way these fall into our various structures of interfacings and intersectionality. Now, you were just recently talking to us about this book that was coming up, and many of us heard that in the last half. Was there anything else that you'd like to say about that too?
Well, you know what? The book is, I like to use, it was a very intentional book and is much so needed. Now, even in me researching other books on mentorship, it wasn't specifically mentorship that they were talking about. Most of the literature that I've read and other books that I've researched were talking about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes mentorship is a two-way street. It's not just sometimes just a mentor teaching a mentee. And it has different layers and it has different levels to it. So, and it looks different with some people. With mentorship, some are platonic, and I've seen some that are not. Some graduate from being a mentee into being a boy or a slave, and I think that's dangerous. So, because influence when it comes to mentorship is something that is very important for me to share and to teach. And just the way that the framework of this book came about, it's like every single chapter pours on another layer or another layer, and it's very intentional. And I want it to be something that changes the lives of generation of leather folks that are going to come after you and I, and for generations to come. And I really wanted to make a difference.
Gotcha. Now, from where I sit as a therapist dealing with interpersonal relationships, all of these things are two-way relationships. I think there's the assumption that it's always a one-way relationship. That creates so much, let's be frank, shit in the world. But that doesn't mean that the two-way relationships work the exact same way, but there is always a two-way component to any of this.
Yeah, everything is through mentorship is really it's an exchange. And currently I have 3 people under mentorship that are here and 1 in DC. And all of them are vastly different. Even my conversations with them are very different. But I do take some parts of stuff that I told this one and I put it into this one because they needed it. So, and then some of it I learned from them, as well as them saying that they learned certain things from me. So as it may be an exchange, it's all about energy as well, too. The exchange of energy. And, sometimes mentorships work and sometimes they don't. It's like a relationship. It's like, if you don't want to receive what I'm saying, then you go about your journey and I'll wish you well. So, I mean, just keeping it 100, you just have to come to a mentorship willing to learn and be disarmed and to learn new things.
Which is a very hard, I think that's also a hard thing because as you were talking about the aspect of relationships, there's so many people who have built up and been told a certain concept about what a relationship's supposed to be. I can't count on how many times when I'm working with clients, I have to remind them there are more than just romantic relationships that exist in there. And there's more ways to consider love than just romantic love that is at play. And even that mentorship relation, mentor and mentor relation, mentee relationship is a different form of love than what you'd experience with romance. But doesn't also mean that it isn't disarming, as you said, place to be vulnerable, which is that standpoint of we're always looking to connect. It's just, what's the quality of the connection? What's the intention of the connection?
And then that takes me to chapter 17, which is mentorship can come from any standpoint, but also in mentorship, there can be predatory behavior. There can be any type of falsehoods that are centered around mentorship to lure people into certain dynamics. And I mentioned before that the influence that mentors have over mentees can be dangerous if it's not used correctly. Because even if if they are friends and then they becomes this huge influence in this person's life, you're molding and shaping that person, and you're responsible ethically for that person's development, and that person is trusting you. And just having that influence over them is very important, and it should always be used correctly.
Which I think too, and we'll touch on this, there is so much of the idea that when we think about leather and kink, we get into that abuse and that predatory nature as being the default people go into when it comes to that. And again, there's an aspect of where somebody gets a myopic lens on this is all that this is, which then frightens some people away from exploring this component of their identity.
Yeah. And some people are going to have that intention because we are sexual creatures, right? And we want to be as sex positive as possible. But during that process and development, this is just me, it should always be kept platonic. It should always be kept platonic for many, many, many reasons. And it's dangerous. I'm serious. And you just don't know how many things I've seen, even from when I was representing the Title Holder Outreach Program from NCSF, is that, reporting incidents like that are like a dime a dozen. And and believe it or not, even from the other spectrum, from a younger perspective, a lot of people don't know about the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, or even how to report an incident, or how to get representation or anything like that. But anytime there is an infraction or trust or violation that was committed, you have to know the proper channels. And this book takes you through the right steps and guide you on how to secure the right type of mentorship. Because my outlook, my 5-10-year plan is to make sure that people are really growing and thriving through mentorship. And trusting it, not just thriving from it, but trusting the process of mentorship.
Very nice. Which brings us so much of that we need to revisit and understand and re-relate to where it is now, to what a mentorship is. Because again, so many things have gotten twisted into it that don't actually need to be there. But this too, what you're saying about the infractions makes me also think about, and this also relates to some of the stuff we were talking that was related to my presentation, is that standpoint of how many people are not even aware of their wounds and the interpersonal relationships, or let alone situations that they're dancing around with. Which is sort of, I'm going to go and jump to this question, is like, what do you think are some of the myths and realities around mental health, especially when it comes to being a Black, gay, leather kinkman?
I think what I will say from a Black perspective is that the shame that comes with having mental health and then not going through the proper channels to fix it or to heal it. And it's become just so taboo, is that we have to be strong Black men. We have to be strong Black women. Oh, I can take care of these 8 babies by myself. I'm a strong Black woman. Using language like that. You're a strong Black man. You can't cry at this funeral. You have to be strong for your family. You have to be strong for your mother. And not having the ability or the freedom to feel or to cry. So I think even when it comes to mental health, I think that us tearing down the wall of shame and it becoming a taboo that Black people don't need mental health is one of the biggest misconceptions. And I think even through and we talked about this at LLC, is that I feel that trauma is generational, that is passed all the way down from slavery, and is something that is just passed down through energy, through spiritual, some kind of way, is that trauma that our ancestors felt, I think that some of that trauma is passed down to us. And then certain things are taught and learned, even how to grieve at a funeral. This is how you grieve at a funeral because I've seen my mother do it. Or you can't go see Dr. Perry Clark because that's not what Black people do. You know, especially, and then you flip it over to a kink side and the fetish side, it's even doubled down and avoided with mental health, and even when it comes down to the kink side. And then you put the kink and the Black side into it. So I think that is something that we as Black and brown people, we need to really work on, is not being ashamed of our mental health when we know that it's needed.
So, guys, side note is that technically I do not have a doctorate. So, but we also need to also recognize that, especially in our community, the word calling somebody a doctor is also an honorific.
That's true.
And it's a very different type of honorific, but it's an aspect of somebody's recognizing that need for somebody who's a healer. Right. Now, the other thing I would throw into what you just said too is, now we also have to consider what we were talking about earlier with those who have spent their time in the Commonwealth and are from the continent in Africa, are also dealing with generational trauma around that aspect of tiptoeing.
Right. That's true. And that is such a normal thing. If you ever come to London, as bad as I wanted you to come to Fetish Week in July with me, and I know you said that you couldn't make it, it is
that's all about scheduling and money. You got to look at those.
I'm telling you, we got to get you there. But when it comes down to, you just have to see it for yourself. And even at the leather socials, the gear socials that we do, I'm typically one of 3 Black guys out of hundreds of others that are there. And I make it my business when I'm in that space to make my way over to them. And the sad part also is that sometimes people who are in that space, who are of color, are not used to seeing anybody else like me with full autonomy. I'm loud, I'm tall, I'm Black. You know, I have a Southern accent. They're not used to that shit. They're really not used to it. And the more that we see each other, the better off Black leather BIPOC people will be. The more we see each other, and we have to validate that. And it has to be a strong validation, and it has to be intentional. Yeah.
Very nice. So anything else you want to say before we go?
I want to say that you and the way that you conduct your classes and level of education is so needed. And I want more of it. And I definitely got to get back in contact with you in your spaces. And my calendar is super full all the way out until July. But I got to get back and share space with you, whether or not I come to San Francisco, stay with Jamal, stay with David or whomever. I got to be in a space where you are teaching something that feeds my soul, because it's so many times that educators like ourselves, we rarely get the opportunity to get our souls poured into, because we pour into so many. And just the way that you teach your class and your style of teaching is spot on. I love it. And I just appreciate you. I really, really do.
Well, thank you very much. And there'll be more to come in the future. I haven't figured out what that schedule is going to look like for myself, but always got to figure out how the schedule is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Busy schedules, man, is something that's swarming in the air now, because I'm doing BBM, I'm doing Austin Kink Weekend, I'm judging and teaching at Self, I'm going to Claw, of course I'm going to IML, I got a cigar social to teach on daddyhood in Savannah, then I'm going to London for Fetish Week, or, the UK, and then Black UK Pride later that month. Yeah, so it's going to be busy. It's going to be super busy.
Very much so. Yeah. So where can folks find you if they want to talk with you more, and especially if they want to be monitoring for this book that's coming?
Well, what I will say, I'm going to give two sources that I deleted my Recon and my FetLife for briefly, because I needed a mental break. But you can find me on Facebook under JTebias Perry, or you can find me on my Instagram, which it looks a little different than my Facebook, and it's under JTebias.i.am, and that's my IG, and my IG is just a little bit more risque than my Facebook.
Okay, well, we'll have some notes for those in the show notes. Just make sure I got those at the end before we end today. And what about also stuff for reporting those violations with NCSF?
Oh, yeah. NCSF is exactly how it is. It is, you can find it on www.ncsf.com. And I can't remember the other website, which is a link, but you can Google National Coalition for Sexual Freedom and file any type of infractions, consent violations, physical or otherwise, with the organization. Yeah.
All righty. Well, folks, this is just the start of what we're going to be providing for you for June and Pride Month. Stay tuned for more as it comes up. And I'm certain we'll probably have Jay back here for something else, especially maybe after that book's released. We can talk a little more in depth about the book itself as we go along. But this has been Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I hope you're being well. I hope you're being safe this Pride, and I hope you are enjoying life this Pride. So we'll catch you later.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.